Hello, Heal with Gold. How are you all? I am so excited to be here with you tonight with somebody that I have been holding my breath to hear from. Mark Waldman. We had scheduled this interview quite a long time ago. We had to reschedule twice, and the date has come. I see people coming in. Please say hello. Tell me who you are because I cannot see you until you comment. And if you don't approve StreamYard, I can't even see your name. So say hello. Tell me your name. Tell me where you're tuning in from. And I'm going to bring to you Mark Waldman. Mark he wears so many hats. He has written 14 books, professor, speaker, neuroscientist, and he speaks about so many subjects that I am extremely curious about. I mean, the brain is probably the least known of all organs, and that's one side that we're going to talk about. There is love, the neuroscience of love. I've never even heard of this term, so I'm extremely curious. Anything that is love related, I'm in. I'm all in. I love anything that has to do with love. I guess maybe it's my Brazilian background that's very warm and passionate. I don't know. But when you combine all of that together, I think it's a recipe for something magnificent. So without further ado, here is Mark Waldman. Hello, Mark. How are you?
Hi. Thank you for having me on the program. When you said it wears so many hats, my big old, bell here works to keep all of that schizophrenic noise out of my head as well.
Oh, it's so funny that you sing this schizophrenic noise because, I paint, and none of my paintings, they don't look alike to each other. I don't have, my way of painting. And I always say I'm a schizophrenic painter. So I use the same term. Welcome. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your knowledge, your wisdom with us. When we talked about that you would speak about the neuroscience of love, I have reached out to some of my friends who love the topic of neuroscience, love the topic about neuroplasticity and anything related to brain. And when they heard neuroscience of love, they were very, very intrigued. So please, before we start with the subject, tell us a little bit more about yourself, about what you do, about your professional life, anything you want to share with us.
Well, we're mostly known. We're one of there are only about 3 major teams in the world who do research on different forms of contemplative practice, meditation, and mindfulness. So I'm part of Andy Newberg's team, and he brought me on back in 2002 because the interesting thing about neuroscience, and Andy Newberg had come up with a very popular book in 2000 called Why God Won't Go Away. And I found out at that time, because I was basically a developmental editor for Tarcher Putnam, and I had put together, 9 anthologies and other kind of books or whatever else. But I found out that if you're the ghostwriter for a very famous neuroscientist, instead of making $15,000 a book, I could make $75,000. And so we teamed up together because Andy and I always have this joke that he can't write and I can't think, so we make the perfect team. And over the last 15 years, I ended up pretty much going from being having a BA in art to being a neuroscience researcher and associate fellow at the Center for Spirituality in the Mind. And that brought me into teaching executive MBA students at Loyola Marymount University. We'd introduce them to these brain-based stress reduction exercises and a very different way of communicating. And our book, How God Changes Your Brain, became became fabulous. And I've been hooked on neuroscience ever since for one interesting reason. Prior to that time, I was very deeply involved in different forms of psychology, psychotherapy, and psychoanalysis, part of the transpersonal psychology movement. And I realized, I've discovered in the research that there are 500 different schools of psychology and about 50 totally different ways of dealing with any problem you have. And I'm scratching my head because I don't know what's wrong with me. I just feel anxious. I mean, I have anxiety that I don't know what's wrong with me. And I'm always looking to figure out what pathology do I fall under? And I kept going from one form to the other, to the other, to the other, to the other. And I finally gave up. And when the door of neuroscience opened up, it was like, oh, cool. Look, this is how your brain works when it's anxious. Oh, this is how your brain works when it's depressed. And that began to show that certain kinds of psychology is a waste of time. It's just a bunch of psychobabble. And so at this particular point, I'm rather well known for neurobabble.
I like that. That's very good. So tell me, I want to know about what happens in the brain when you're anxious, because I think that in this group, I know for a fact, there are many caregivers, there are many victims of stroke, there are many people who went through trauma, and there are many people that just feel anxious and they don't even understand why, because their life is not that chaotic. I've spoken to people that say, I don't know even if I have the right to feel as bad as I feel, because I know people that went through trauma, they went through this, they went through that. My life is not so terrible, but I'm anxious all the time. So obviously the brain is doing something. Tell me about the brain.
Well, I like to play games when I'm interviewed with you and with everyone who's watching on this call. And so what I'd like you to do, and because some of the strategies for how to really undermine anxiety and to get in touch with, well, what the genuine experience of love is, because it has nothing to do with what we think it is. If I was to ask you right now, Miriam, what would you say anxiety is? Let's say, I've come from Mars. I haven't. I really came from a different planet, and I hear all these people talking about anxiety. What is anxiety?
Very difficult question. I'm going to do my best. And it's interesting because until a few years ago, I never would have said that I felt anxiety. And for me, and lately I do. So for me, anxiety is a new thing. So what I feel when I'm anxious is that my heart is pumping too strongly. I feel that internal noise of that effort for the blood to pump, which I start feeling a little bit like, I don't know what's next. I don't know how to deal with feelings or with that moment or whatever is on my plate at that moment. But I don't know that everybody feels anxiety as I feel, because I can't say that I've been dealing with anxiety for too long. Maybe I have a blood pressure issue. I don't know.
I never even knew that I was anxious, because I had a whole bunch of bad therapists who were diagnosing me with maybe he's schizoid or whatever else, or detached. He's always off in his head and his mind, and blah, 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 blah. And what I discovered as I began to realize, oh, I'm kind of a highly anxious person. I'm kind of worried about everything. I'm not sure about anything. I'm not sure, I think the biggest one for me and for most people would be social anxiety. I would walk into a room of people and I'd be terrified about, I didn't know how to meet anybody. And so after a while, I gave up not being able to find a solution to it. After 12 years of therapy and even the 20 years of psychology research that I did, I just assumed, well, I'm a highly anxious person, and went around dealing with that. And then I noticed that the clients that I was working with, because I'm a therapist and what I call a NeuroCoach, is that highly anxious people don't even know that they're highly anxious. And if you actually take away their anxiety, either through an anti-anxiety pill, which is as much of a placebo as it is having a real effect, but those people say, I can't stand this. I don't know how to work. In other words, we get used to working in this highly anxious, worrisome kind of situation and running around. Now, here's an interesting thing. You do what most people did. You put anxiety in your body.
Mm-hmm.
But here's an interesting neurological fact that's quite surprising to most people. We don't feel our bodies. Pain doesn't happen in the body. We do not store memories in the body. We're not even, when I stroke my hands in a way that feels incredibly pleasurable, the pleasure isn't happening here. It's happening in these different sections of the brain. So what I want you and everybody else to do, in order to actually have a closer sense of what's going on, you have to get out of your thinking. In other words, we think we know what anxiety might be. We think we know what love might be. We think we may know what's wrong with us. We may think we know what's right about us. But thinking only takes place in this little tiny part of your executive network, dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. I will test you on that later to see if you remember that.
Don't.
But anything that we are consciously aware of, any of the words you're remembering that I say, those words are pulled out from vast memory storage areas kind of here in your temporal lobe, and they're pulled into these two little tiny areas called working memory. And that's what we're consciously aware of at any one time. And it's probably one of the oldest, there are few facts in neuroscience. That's why I like being here. I can make up all kinds of things, and all I have to do is add the word maybe. And but if you forget to use the word maybe, then we know you don't know what you're talking about. So in order to actually experience ourselves, in order to actually make a genuine connection with another person, we can't be thinking about the other person. We can't be thinking about what we're going to say. We have to be in the present moment to engage the other person. But to be in the present moment, you can't be thinking about. The best we can do is being aware of. And I just want you and everybody to kind of think about that for a moment. Thinking about something is not the same as being aware of. So what we found is that there's a set of very simple strategies that puts you into a state of what I like to call relaxed mindful awareness. And people who are familiar with mindfulness-based practices, that's what they're always saying. Okay, well, focus on your breathing, just come into the present moment and notice what's going on at the present time. And they have you focus on your breathing. Now, I don't know about you, but I've done mindfulness practice for 20 or 30 years. And for the first 10 years, I sat there, okay, I'm focusing on my breathing. What's supposed to be happening about this? Okay, this is irritating. This is boring. Maybe I'll focus on my breathing some more. It was like, I didn't get it because I was constantly thinking about the experience of breathing. Well, I think all the time, and thinking is a key element of what anxiety can be. So how do you turn off your thinking? I'll ask you again, Miriam, and everybody else who's listening to this, take a moment and say, what do you have to do to stop thinking? Can you stop thinking right now?
I can never stop thinking. I say that my brain sparkles because it's always like exploding with ideas. I'm very creative and I'm always thinking. I try to stop thinking. Maybe that's anxiety.
Yes, exactly. If you're trying to stop thinking, then you're trying to figure out a strategy to stop thinking. Now, I like to use this little map that was actually created with a group of adolescent TBI stroke victims, or well, they mostly had like brain tumors, and so everything had to be made much more simpler.
Mhm.
So when we're thinking, and I'm talking about that dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, that's that little area right there,
Mhm.
and it's part of the executive network. But I prefer to use the word thinking network. So this is where we select our words, organize all the information that's coming in, and decide how we want to take a specific conscious action to achieve a specific goal. That's what we call thinking. Very simple thing. But the hugest part of our brain up here,
Mhm.
neuroscientists will call default mode network. When we're not thinking, if I was to ask you and everybody else, just take a moment and just close your eyes for a moment and let your mind just kind of wander. Don't try to think about anything, because this is what we have to do when you're doing brain scan studies of people meditating.
Mhm.
In this state of rest, does it feel like you are thinking less?
Yes.
Now, here's the cool thing. You would think in that state there'd be less activity going on in your brain, right?
There's more.
More activity going on in your brain when you are not thinking. So, what happens when we relax, particularly, and it's easy to do when your eyes are closed, because then the brain kind of introspects, turns itself inward. Whereas, like right now, I'm paying attention to you, I'm watching how I'm moving my hands. This is all task oriented, thinking oriented behavior. But the moment I close my eyes and I just relax, this huge orange area lights up. That's your default mode network. But it's better, it's easier to be called the imagination network. This
Mm.
is the part of your brain up here that's constantly dreaming up, and dreaming is a good word because it's like a daydream state, dreaming up all the possible things that may or may not happen in the future. This is the prediction part of your brain. It's absolutely essential. You are born with this huge imagination. Oh, you can't do much. You can't think very clearly. You can't achieve your goals, but you can imagine it. And you think, oh, I want that. And maybe I can reach out for that or whatever else. Oh, no, I failed. I dropped it. I can't get it. I don't know how to say anything. Call my mom. I'm just going to scream. And what's going on here is that one side of this huge imagination network is dreaming up all the possible things that may or may not go wrong in the future if you did A, B, or C. The other side is simultaneously dreaming up all the things that may or may not go right in the future, and that if you did D, E, and F. They're going on all the time. When we start to think about all the things we may or may not do or could do, how we might succeed and how we might fail, we're selecting from that vast range of possibilities. And that's what a very successful person does. That's if you're sitting at the stove and you have to turn it on and you're chopping up the onions and everything else. You don't want to think about how should I chop up the onion? What would be the best way? What could go wrong? I mean, oops, I'm holding the knife by the wrong end and I'm cutting myself. No, we have all these memories and things that we form that have worked in the past. So we're on automatic pilot. But then we hit a barrier. Okay. I want to make beef bourguignon, and I don't even know what the word bourguignon means. So at that moment, since I can't organize my thinking, that shuts off, and then all this busyness comes up here. Maybe it means the south of France. Maybe it means whatever. And in that noise, if we take our attention and focus on all the worrisome possibilities. So in other words, anxiety, there's a better word for anxiety than anxiety. It's called uncertainty.
Mhm.
Maybe this will happen. Maybe this won't happen. And if you simultaneously embrace both sides, well, if I did this, I'm going to succeed. But if I did that, I'm going to fail. But I might do it, but I might not do that, and I might succeed. And you go back and forth in that state of neurological anxiety called daydreaming. Then you start to think and believe that you don't know what to do. That's anxiety.
I see. Wow.
So there's a even easier way to talk about anxiety.
Very,
I'm
wow.
lost in the negative side of my imagination network. Now, if you get lost in the positive side of your imagination network, then you become impulsive. Oh, I'm going to go off to Vegas and I know I'm going to win $1 billion by betting all of my money on number 7 on the roulette wheel. That would be dangerous. So we really need both sides, but we have to stop ourselves from believing in all of those positive and negative thoughts and dreams and imaginations and fantasies. And there's a very simple technique to get rid of too much busyness up here. So too much busyness in your imagination center causes what's called neurological stress. Okay. So when that's going on, neurons up there are firing really, really fast, and they generate a lot of heat in that particular process. So even when you get angry or whatever else, you genuinely are hot-headed.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you get rid of neurological stress when you can't even feel your brain?
This is so fascinating right now. It's like, wowza, because I think that it took everything into one area of the body. And if you can control that part, then you can control the stress and the anxiety and so many other things. Because as you said, everything that you sense is really in the brain.
But control comes from here.
Right.
And if you spend too much time controlling, guess what? You use up all the neurochemicals necessary to stay highly focused, and you go into what's simply called burnout.
Right. Oh, wow.
So work burnout means
Oh my God.
nothing's functioning very well. So back in around 2008, a team of researchers headed by Gallup at State University, New York, discovered something interesting. That yawning is the brain's way to wake up. If you notice, every bird and mammal, what's the first thing your cat and dog does when it wakes up? It stretches. It turns out that yawning is considered a thermoregulatory mechanism. It increases blood flow that goes up to, if you're overly thinking, too much busyness over here, overly lost in anxiety or imagination or depression, okay, too much activity going here, yawning increases cerebral blood flow, and it's like the radiator in your car. Your car engine gets overheated, the yawning brings blood flow there and cools everything down. It slows down excessive neurological activity. Now, all of this is kind of wonderful and interesting intellectually, but I'm sure you're and everybody else is as anxious as you were to start out with. You can't feel the brain, but I can give you all a demonstration on how it works, and to suggest to you that what I'm about to teach you is literally the number one most essential thing to do 3 or 4 times an hour. And particularly if you're feeling anxious or exhausted, it will refresh the neurochemicals in your brain, and it'll put you into a state of being in the present moment where you're neither anxious nor are you thinking very much. So most of the time we go back and forth between thinking about deciding what we could do to plan something, back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And if that gets out of balance, in other words, when we're awake, you have to spend 50% of your time in imagination as versus thinking. There's this other structure called the Salience Network. That's that blue area there. And you see where I have that asterisk?
Yes, the center.
Those are 2 structures that keep showing up in every brain scan study of people doing meditation, people doing Buddhist practices, Hindu practices, doing sata, nama, Christian centering prayer, or simply pure mindfulness of sitting back and just watching how your thoughts and feelings and imagination are constantly bouncing all over the place. So you can step outside of thinking about how I'm thinking and what's going on and become aware of how these thought processes are actually going on. So you begin to observe the inner cognitive processes of your brain. But to do so, you have to be cognitively relaxed. You can't have too much busyness going on. So I want to guide you and everybody here through 3 mindful yawns.
Okay.
And the 3 has to do with some people just won't get it the first time. So Miriam, on a scale of 1 to 10, how mentally relaxed do you think you are at the moment? I'm really excited right now, so I know I'm way off the scale in terms of
not relaxed at all.
Okay, great. Give that a number from 1 to 10.
10 being least relaxed.
Highly anxious or excited, because excitement and anxiety are exactly the same neurological process.
I would say 8.
Okay, an 8. And everybody else, pick out a particular number. This is important because you have to compare it to something.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we have to do this with our executive MBA students. If you're going to teach stress reduction or mindfulness or any form of improvement of cognitive function, they're not going to give you 40 minutes of practice. They're not going to give you 5 minutes of time, but they will give you 60 seconds. So we had to create all these 60-second exercises. And yawning is the most popular one amongst executive business people because it only takes 10 seconds. So in 5 minutes, I have to teach everyone how to have the experience of 8 months of mindfulness training and practice. And that's what I'm going to do with you and everybody else. Okay. I'm going to do it in less than 5 minutes. Okay. What I mean by a mindful yawn is simply, I want you to be, listen to the difference between thinking about versus awareness. I want you to be aware of, where does that yawn begin as you start to yawn? What does it feel like as you yawn? And then after you've yawned, take at least 10 seconds and don't think about the experience. Just tell me if you've noticed any shift in your mental state or your mood. Okay, are you ready? Everyone ready? So do this with your eyes closed. Don't open them up until we're finished with the 3 mindful yawns. All of us, and I'll do it with you. Start with that first mindful yawn, even if you have to fake it. And now just sit there and see if you notice any shift in your mental state or your mood. And Miriam, see if you can stay in this state and describe any shift that you notice in your mental state or your mood.
I have a feeling like almost lightheaded a little bit because I'm noticing like a pulsating in the brain, almost like it just stopped a marathon and it's pulsating.
So pause for a moment, and everybody, whatever you notice, and if you didn't notice anything at all, that's fine. Just savor what you've noticed. Savoring means you kind of immerse yourself more in the experience of what you just said. Because we can't feel our brain, and the words we select remove us from the experience of whatever is going on. And most people, with their first mindful yawn, some will feel nothing at all, but they will on the second time, they say, I might feel more relaxed, or my body feels tingly, or, what you describe. But what you've done is describe physical sensations. And I asked you specifically, did you notice any shift in your mental state or your mood?
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why everybody goes to the physical is that we've never been taught to pay attention to what our mental state feels like. And because it doesn't feel the same as a body state, that's why I ask you the question, what do you notice any shift in that mental state or your mood? In other words, do you notice any shift in how you are thinking or how your attention or awareness has changed? So everyone, let's try your second mindful yawn And it's open just to see what you discover. Again, if nothing happens, that's okay. There's no right or wrong in this. Do you notice any shift in your mental state or your mood now?
Yes, a lightness and less, like a more relaxed, like the whole body, the whole, like inside, like my soul is peace in peace.
So again, has it shifted your mental state at all?
I'm not thinking about anything, but I'm in the moment.
Which most people would use a word would be, well, I feel more calm.
Mm-hmm.
There's less busy thoughts going on.
Yes, it's quiet.
Let's do one more mindful yawn and see if you can notice that it becomes harder and harder to even think, but you just begin to feel, well, you're just here.
Calm.
And in this state, it's even hard for me to find words. It almost feels to me like I have a zombie brain.
Mm-hmm.
See if you can keep this state as you open up your eyes. In other words, just not going back into thinking about. Let's just be aware of. In this case, everyone, just be aware of Miriam's and my face, the color or the tone of our skin, the patterns on our shirt. And you don't have to do anything. When we're thinking about something, we're doing something with our thoughts. And you're in the present moment, you're just being present with. It's a being state. And you and I are just here. And it might even become hard to say anything. All that excitement is like, I don't even know what I said a moment ago. I have no idea of what I even might want to say next. I'm just kind of here with you. I'm noticing the patterns on the wall behind you. And you, what is your experience of just being present without thoughts?
Like it's calm, it's tranquil, and it's like the ocean. I'm just there. How I feel when I'm at the beach, which is a very good, calm state for me.
Now you're slipping back into judgment a little bit. But again, remember, we're going to go back and forth between thinking and imagination. But we can also go back and forth between thinking, being aware of how we're thinking, being aware of how the mind kind of wanders around. So if all of you were watching Miriam, when I asked her to describe her experience, you started to speak much, much slower. Like it's even hard to find a word to describe what you're experiencing.
Exactly. Even now, I feel like I have to make an effort to speak.
On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being high anxiety, 0 being none, can you even find the slightest ounce of anxiety?
Not at all.
You have turned off activity in that imagination center. You're no longer predicting the future. You're not thinking about what may or may not happen. You're just here. And that's that blue area that's being stimulated. The two structures that'll always come up are the anterior cingulate and the insula. But in this state, that blue network, that Salience Network, this is also your social brain. When it's activated, it creates the ideal optimal balance between your thinking and your imagination. And in your imagination is your creativity as well, and the creative problem solving skills of that imagination network. So all you have to do is figure out what's the fastest way to stop having too much activity up here and too much activity here, just to take 10 or 15 seconds. I use the bell so that people download a mindfulness clock onto their cell phone and set it to ring 3 times an hour. And when you hear that bell ring, just do one mindful yawn or a super slow movement. And that would be, if you all just kind of drop your head forward and close your eyes. And Miriam, I want you to take actually, I want everybody to watch Miriam first before we do this. Miriam, I want you to take a full 60 seconds to roll your head just once. Now notice that she's actually she didn't take a full 60 seconds. You've done that in about 15 seconds, Miriam. So keep rolling your head. Cut the speed in half. And you can all start doing this with your eyes open, watching Miriam and I. Miriam, you're still going way too fast. Cut your speed in half again. You're going so slow. You notice that the slower you go with your eyes closed, the more you feel those little tiny aches and pains. When you feel a little tiny ache and pain, just pause and yawn into that little achiness and see if the pain disappears. And for 80% of the people who do this super slow micro movement with any part of your body, if you move very tiny movements, feel a painful area, and yawn into it and just become aware, you'll notice that pain dissolves because yawning helps to regulate about 5 of the pain regulatory mechanisms in your brain. Most of our pain is imaginary, worrisome. It's not even connected to actual damage to tissues that have occurred in your body. But for those that the yawning doesn't work, this super slow roll of your head can bring you even much more into the present moment. And if you slowly bring your head up to center and slowly open up your eyes, what you want to do now is to learn how to speak from this state of awareness. So you have to trust your intuition to let it select the best words to describe anything or just to have a mindful conversation with me. So what's the first thought that comes into your mind? And share it.
Beyond calm and surprised by how something so simple can make such a tremendous impact in my body, in my emotional state. My hands are heavy and calm.
And you can just pause there. Most of the time, it's hard for a person to come up with 10 words. Because remember, that's all we can be consciously aware of at one time. In this state, I'm willing to bet that your anxiety level is so low you can't even find it.
Yeah.
But some people will still continue to talk too fast, and the talking will pull you right back into this anxious, excited state, whatever else. So we ask people in workshops and in all kinds of groups where we're teaching a new communication strategy, we teach them how to enter this state of relaxed, mindful awareness. But most people will still talk too fast and talk too much, like I'm doing right now. The other person, if I was to pause right now, Miriam, you're only going to be remember about 10 words that I've said, and it might not even be anything that I said. But if you tell that person to hold their hands, count each word, stop at 10 or maximum 20, you'll communicate precisely better what you wanted to convey in small chunks, then you pause, the other person responds in 10 or 20 words, pause, and you can solve problems in any situation in maybe 5 or 10 minutes that might normally take 20 or 30 hours in psychotherapy.
I'm blown away.
So now in this state, you and I will stay here because you asked me about love. And rather than thinking about love, and if it's easier for you to do this with your eyes closed, that's fine. You can do it with your eyes closed or open. Ask your intuition, not your thinking mechanism. What's the first thing that comes to mind about what love is intuitively on a deeper level? In 10 words or less.
A deep connection, admiration, feeling oneness.
Now, everyone, savor what she said. Deep connection, feeling oneness. And see if that resonates to you and reflects some quality of love. Love is not an idea. It's not a word. The neuroscientific definition of love is simply being in the present moment with another person. And that experience, if it is pleasurable, is love. And it constantly changes. Has nothing to do with your definition, has nothing to do with your memories of love. And if you don't pull yourself into the present moment, you're not connected with the other person. You're just in your own head and your own fantasies, your own imagination about love, or lost in your memories about what love could be or should be or has been in the past. So let's continue this conversation, Miriam, with eyes open, but using your intuition. Ask me any question you want that ever pops into your mind in 10 words, 20 if you need, and I will respond in 10 or 20 words, and watch how this dialogue unfolds.
Can you begin to love someone you don't like at all?
I'm closing my eyes and I'm just going to share with you, making sure that I'm relaxed and grounded in the present moment. A question came to my mind. Are you sure that you don't like that person?
I wasn't thinking of anybody in particular, but I am fascinated about the importance of we making an effort to love everybody.
Well, remember, one of the key words in the neuroscientific definition of love is where both people are engaged in a pleasurable experience.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's possible to take somebody that you're fighting with, because liking can change from moment to moment. I mean, if you really hate the person, you don't stand. No, I don't think you can love them. I think you shouldn't try either. But maybe your partner has just pissed you off, something, whatever else.
Mm-hmm.
Here's where the yawning will dissolve some of that irritability, slow down the emotional reaction that's taking place. And one of the ways to know whether or not you can connect with that person is ask yourself, is there anything you like about that person? And here's an incredible exercise that we use. We teach this even to oncologists and therapists, particularly if you have to deal with a difficult person. Everyone, just close your eyes for a moment. And I want you to think about somebody you deeply care for, or somebody who has deeply cared for and loved you. And see if you can visualize that person and somehow bring up the memory of what it felt like being in the presence of that person you care for or who has cared for you. And notice how that feels. Who are you visualizing, Miriam, and what does it feel like?
My father.
And let that sense of caring flow through you. And you can do this in any situation where you might be anxious about a conversation with somebody. You pause outside of the meeting room. We teach doctors who have to deliver bad news before they walk into the consulting room. We teach therapists to do this. Take a moment and deeply relax, yawn, stretch, focus on a deep inner value. Recall this pleasant memory and somebody you deeply care for. That too will take you into this kind of pleasurable, present in the moment state. Then you walk into that situation, deliberately walking a little slower, consciously speaking a little slower. And in that state, again, think about that person who you deeply love, Miriam, and everybody watch what happens to Miriam's face. Think about somebody else who you deeply love and care for, or an event that brought you great satisfaction. There it is. See that slight uptick of the corners of her mouth? A Mona Lisa smile is starting to form. And you can do this with 100 people in the room. You ask them to think about somebody they deeply love or an event that brought them great satisfaction. And their all eyes are closed. And you see this Mona Lisa smile spread through like 90% of the people. And then when you open up your eyes, you don't feel social anxiety. The experiment, we just, you pair everybody up, you just, be about 3 feet apart from each other and just gaze at each other. And it becomes really uncomfortable really fast. But when you're holding that image, everyone, they see that facial expression, they feel like you are caring for them, because that is the only facial expression that stimulates neurological trust in the other person.
Wow.
And there's one kind of person, however, you can't fake it. It has to be real. So when you're with that person, even if it's somebody you're irritated with, think about one quality about that person you really like. And again, you'll see that kind of Mona Lisa smile begin to appear. But a sociopath, somebody like Bernie Madoff, they know how, they don't feel any empathy, but they can fake that smile, and you will think that they're genuinely caring for you, even when you know they're ripping you off.
Wow.
See, a fake smile kind of looks like a smirk. And this is based on Paul Ekman's research of 10,000 facial expressions.
It blows me away because I think that the way you explain this, you can recenter yourself just by thinking about the person you love. Because the moment that I started thinking about how I feel, how my father passed, how I felt his love for me, which was his complete love, unconditional, I felt secure. And I felt calm because I had his love with me.
So the strategies are very simple. Once an hour, twice an hour, particularly when you're working, because we normally lose ourselves in trying to get the work done that we have to get done or think we're done. Just do one mindful yawn or one super, super slow stretch, or think of a pleasant moment or somebody you care for, or ask yourself this question, and then you can just close your eyes for a moment. What is your deepest, Miriam, what is your deepest innermost value? Everyone, pay attention to the first word that creeps in. What is one of your deepest innermost values? See if you can find just one word to capture. That's
integrity.
What was the word?
Integrity.
Okay. Mine's peace. And then you savor that. You let the sense of that word flow through you. That's a value word. This also stimulates that salience network, the thing that creates that ideal optimal balance between the other brain networks. But you can do this 2 or 3 times. What's another deep inner value that comes to you?
Healing.
And we'll savor that. What is your deepest relationship value?
Compassion.
Mine at the moment is being present. What is your deepest communication value?
Listening.
Yeah, that was mine too. You know, being listened to, being accepted.
Mm-hmm.
You can take 2 people who are going into a divorce who can't. We teach this to divorce mediators. They can't spend 10 seconds without yelling and screaming at each other. You can ask them, what is your deepest, innermost value? Your deepest relationship value? Your deepest communication value? They give you theirs. Almost always, you can both agree that those are worthy values. And then you tell both people, stay anchored to those values as we walk through the conflict. And it becomes impossible if you stay relaxed with that mindful yawn, super slow stretch, anchored to a deep inner value, holding on to an image that you deeply love. Doesn't have to even be about that person. You'll undermine conflicts before they begin. And that's what you should do with any partner you have, friend or colleague, and teach them a mindful yawn, a super slow movement, teach them what awareness and mindfulness is all about. And then see if you can have this 10-word dialogue back and forth with each other. What's going on in the brain is the ideal balance, shifting from thinking to awareness, to imagination and creativity, to thinking. All of this stops the green area, or your emotional centers, from being too low or too high, Goldilocks effect. And that's what all of the newest research, this is called brain network theory, points to as being a state of optimal psychological health. Spend too much time thinking about or worrying about or fantasizing about or being emotional about, and your whole brain is out of balance, because that blue area is your social brain. In that state of relaxed mindful awareness, you're stimulating von Economo neurons that are responsible for empathy, compassion, forgiveness, intuition, self-love, and social awareness of the other person. It's that simple. That's love. Just 3 networks and little 10-second exercises that you can do to bring yourself into the present moment. And as long as both of you have a sense of pleasure, relaxed, mindful sense of just being comfortable with, that is what love is in the present moment. And it's constantly changing from one moment to the next. It's not an idea. It's not a memory. It is the experience of being present without stress.
I am blown away in so many ways. I mean, this should save the world from people from each other if this was taught to everybody.
Well, I feel the same way. And it was about 7 or 8 months ago, during another interview, and the interviewer wanted me to talk about, basically wanted me to talk about, the feelings that come from rejection and separation and divorce and all that type of painful. And she said, Mark, but you have to give these people a program. And I said, well, sure. I've never written a program on love before and the brain. And I visualized doing about 3 videos like this, like this one. And I would monitor it, and I'd have the PowerPoint slides showing what's going on in the brain. And it would be maybe 4 or 5 hours of recording. There were 23 hours. And I take a person through 7 neurological stages of love, from the moment you're born, desire, to when you hit that adolescent stage and you're filled with lust for. And then as you begin to have the desire to have a stronger connection, and you move through the fantasies of romance until you hit the reality, and you go through the periods of disappointment and rejection and hurt and fear and relationship anxiety, you can then push yourself through the things I've been showing you into a state of acceptance. Just being first aware of all of your memories, positive and negative, that have shaped your old ideas about love. I'll walk you through the experience of each one of those in the kind of dialogue that we had. And it became incredibly intimate, because normally everything slowed down for me. And I created it in a way that you could actually I could actually have a dialogue with you, even though it was pre-recorded, and that you would feel like you were dialoguing with me, as a strategy to, once you learn that, to then teach it to your partner, to your kids, bring it into the workplace. And that's the last program I created, and maybe the final program that I'll create in my life, because it just culminated everything about social anxiety, where we started with, to actually, how do I stay present with you and experience what's happening without all of my old beliefs and ideas and fears and fantasies.
We're going to talk, and I'm going to share all this information with my followers, because I experienced this with you right now, and I haven't felt this anxiety free and this stillness.
Yeah, and see, you're staying in it.
Yeah.
It's an experiential sense. That's why anything I write about it won't work. And anytime you and I just talk about it won't work either. It'll just go into words and ideas and old beliefs and everything else. But it's not that hard to pull yourself and another person into these just brief moments of relaxed, mindful awareness, with, even for a few moments, you and I are just present and with each other. And those of you who are watching this, hopefully you can have a sense, because I'm talking directly to you right now.
Mm-hmm.
And you can ask your own intuition. You can type it into the chat box if you want. The most important question I ask my students at the end of a class, or I ask my clients at the end of a session, I again have them close their eyes, deeply relax, and then ask your intuition, what have you found to be the most? Share with me one insight, one discovery, something that you found incredibly useful and valuable that you can actually teach to somebody else. What comes to your mind, Miriam?
What I'm learning for myself, I don't know if it's for somebody else, but is that the stillness and the moment, the pleasure of the sensation of the moment is so strong and good.
And because we don't really ever stay in the present moment for very long, your brain is designed to keep shifting back and forth between these networks. That's the reason why in mindfulness practice now and in the neuroscience of savoring is taking an extra amount of time to immerse yourself in the positive experience. And if you've had a traumatic experience, somebody, has yelled and screamed at you because there's a lot of abuse in relationships. You teach yourself how to be in this present moment, and you just observe the hurts, the feeling, the anger. So you can be present with rage and not be rageful. You can be peaceful and watch all of those going on inside of your imagination or coming up from your memories.
Mark, I don't know what to say. This was beyond my imagination. I never expected to experience.
Literally beyond your imagination.
Yes, beyond. No, but I experienced for the first time a different type of calm, a different type of quiet inside my brain that is very relaxing, and it couldn't have come in a better time for me personally, as my husband is very ill and we're going through a lot. So I think that I'm going to be doing a lot of yawning when I'm in the hospital next week and he's going through his surgery. Wow.
Oh, by all means. Yeah. And you could do that with him, next to him, with that Mona Lisa smile and that calmness. Their brain will neurologically resonate to your own mental state. So if you're highly anxious inside, that's what the other person's going to feel. Is this being recorded for other people to watch?
Yes.
So even if you're watching this live, watch it again. You've gone through it once, but play it again, and ideally play it with a friend or a colleague or a partner, and go more deeply into the little tiny exercises that I briefly guided you and Miriam through in this time. And please pass it on to others. These are very simple strategies. Neuroscience is incredibly complicated, but it operates on the simplest frameworks. It's based on pleasure, being in the present moment where you can really decide what action to take next that will bring you more satisfaction in life or in work.
Incredible. Mark, look, Amanda is writing, this was life-changing for me. And I wanted to leave here on the screen and read it out loud, because it is very interesting how sometimes we don't appreciate the value of these moments sometimes, and we don't realize how 1 hour with you will change so many people's lives. So I ask you, please share this video, because you don't know who you're going to be helping. And that is what love is, right? Is when we share something.
I want to add two more things, which is in a different area. We didn't talk about the green area, emotions. Well, we have core emotions. This is the work of Jack Panksepp with mammals. And we're all familiar with the emotions of fear and rage and grief. But two of the most important emotions is curiosity, the desire to because that's the state after you yawn. When you wake up and you yawn and stretch, your brain is curious. It wants to find things that are interesting to it. And playfulness is a core key emotion that's been stripped away from our educational system. Play with what I'm teaching you. Play with your partner. There's no rules about this. Use your intuition. Be creative. Be imaginative. Use that imagination center. And always be curious. There's always something new and different that you can do. And play with it. Don't take love or neuroscience or yourself seriously.
Love it. Love it. Mark, thank you so much, really so much. I will share all of your links. I already received it. I want to thank Sarah Maxwell for helping me organize this event. I couldn't have done without her. And Mark, I hope that we can stay in touch.
Oh, yeah. So don't forget to laugh. It's
Very
a
good.
wonderful way to end.
Everybody, thank you so much for being here. Have a good night. I hope you enjoy. Don't forget to share, and I'll see you next time.